The table that you're looking at is our Vietnam communications table. This table covers the primary communication devices used during the Vietnam War. On the left side of the table, you have vacuum tube technology, very similar to the type of technology that we ended World War II with. By the right side of the table, you have modern state-of-the-art radios that would be used until well after the year 2000. The first radio is the PRC-10 field radio. This radio was used primarily by the United States Marine Corps and had a very limited range, about 1.5 to 2 miles, and was very limited in its frequency range. Many Marines told us during the Vietnam War they actually had to carry 2 on their back. The battery was 135 volts and was physically heavier than the radio itself. Next to that, you have the PRC-6 field walkie-talkie. This walkie-talkie had a 95 volt battery, 1 frequency, and had about 1 mile in range. When we were done using them, we sold our surplus to Israel. When they were done using them, they sold them back to the United States as surplus for the collector's market. Hence why it still has an Israeli identification tag. Wired communication is by far the most preferred secured type of communication. So this is a spool of comm wire with the equipment necessary to cut it and wire the different field phone communication devices. This is an E8 field phone. It was used first in World War II and still in use during Vietnam. These field phones would be wired using this wire to a switchboard very similar to this. When they called in the switchboard, these little crystals would light up and they would know to connect them to the command post so that communication could be conducted between an observation post and the command post. This device right here is a battery tester. Because of all the different types of batteries in use during the Vietnam War, radio telegraph operators would have to have these devices to ensure their batteries are in good working order before they went to the field, so they wouldn't take bad batteries out with them. As technology evolved, these old style of tube-based technology radios became obsolete, and a new generation of radios would be introduced in the form of the PRC-25 and the PRC-77 radios. Both of these radios look identical on the outside. However, the 25 had 1 vacuum tube in it in a power control module, and the 77 was a completely solid state radio. The PRC-25 had a 5-mile range, whereas the PRC-77 had a 10-mile range maximum using the long whip antenna. These radios had over 1,000 frequencies and only used a small 12-volt battery. During the Vietnam War, experimentation was conducted using modern technology in the form of this device here, which is the radio transmitter and the radio receiver. The idea was that the radio transmitter would be given to officers and senior staff NCOs to give their squad leaders instructions on what they wanted to do in a battle area. The problem was, if a lieutenant told his squad leaders to move forward, and the lieutenant could not know if the squad leaders were under fire or maybe even wounded, compromised, because they had no way of communicating back to tell them they could not move forward. So this experiment was short-lived. By the end of Vietnam, you have the introduction of the TA-312 field phone, which replaced the EE-8 field phone. And finally, you have the TA-1 field phone. This field phone has actually created and generated its own electrical power and did not need batteries.